He became the strongest hero in the world, only to realize he maxed out the wrong class. Bleeding out from a fatal ambush, his killers drop a nightmare reveal. His true talent was actually magic. But instead of dying, he wakes up 14 years in the past, powerless and strictly banned from casting spells. The rule is simple: pick sword or magic. Mix then, and your body explodes. So he completely glitches the system. Using a broken exploit from his past life, he throws away his sword and enters the Magic Academy. The elite rich kids think he's a total joke, but he is not bothered. The story kicks off with a dramatic animation about massive, terrifying monsters that treat humanity like an all-you-can-eat buffet. We spot a gargantuan red dragon hovering over a city, looking completely ready to cause some serious property damage. The narration drops some heavy lore, explaining that humanity has two specific paths to fight back using the mana floating in the air. First up is the path of the Mage, where people create supernatural miracles. We see a bunch of mages throwing glowing magic circles at the dragon like they are trying to speedrun a boss raid. Then there is the path of the Swordsman, where fighters forge their bodies and will into superhuman weapons. The catch is that you can only pick one lane. You either get absolutely crushed by your own weakness or master your path and become a hero. Right on cue, our protagonist steps up and slices the dragon in half with a single, clean slash. Someone in the crowd screams out for Master Oscar, completely fangirling over the fact that he came all the way out to this remote place. Oscar politely accepts their thanks, surrounded by relieved families and a father comforting his crying daughter. The narration chimes in to confirm the main character chose the sword over magic, climbing to the absolute top of the swordsman food chain. Suddenly, we're looking at a little girl totally mesmerized by a street magician, calling the magic pretty. Oscar watches the magician with a startled look, realizing that even though he is a living legend now, he is still secretly harboring a massive childhood crush on magic. Fast forward to a scenic mountain area where our guy is getting his sweat on. Two little kids are hiding in the bushes, actively spying on him. One points out this is his daily morning routine. The other kid notes that their master never misses a day, explaining that years of him aggressively flapping his sword around has literally hollowed out the solid ground. The skeptical kid gets distracted by a piece of paper in his friend's hand. The friend remembers he is supposed to be a messenger and runs up to Oscar, handing over an official letter from the imperial capital. The main character reads it, and when the kid nervously asks if it is bad news, he just smirks. Oscar complains that the capital wants to give him a shiny medal for slaying the dragon called Grief, grumbling about how annoying it is to be summoned when it actively cuts into his workout time. The kid points out that our protagonist is probably the only person on Earth who would complain about a massive promotion. Oscar brushes it off, insisting he has absolutely zero interest in petty factional drama and just wants to train in peace, showing off hands that are practically more callous than skin. Curious, the kid asks if he just really loves the sword. The main character looks a bit caught off guard, gives a soft smile, and admits he does not particularly love it. He reveals he only picked up a blade because his dad, a former swordmaster, told him to. The kid is absolutely floored by this casual confession. Oscar privately reflects that he never actually chose this heavy-lifting lifestyle of his own free will. Still reeling, the kid admits he is super jealous of his master's natural talent. The kid explains he enrolled in the Sword Academy willingly, but is currently having a minor existential crisis about lacking talent, even wondering if he should switch careers and become a mage. The narration steps in to explain why that is a terrible idea. Mages use mana and swordsmen use aura, channeling energy through specific circuits in the body. If you mix them up, it is like pouring water into your veins instead of blood. Your circuits go completely berserk and your body collapses, meaning your initial career choice is quite literally a matter of life and death. Seeing his student looking like a deflated balloon, Oscar rests a reassuring hand on the kid's shoulder. He advises the kid that if he has enough free time to worry, he has enough time to swing his sword. He adds that he just kept swinging, and before he knew it, he ended up at the top. The pep talk works perfectly. The kid's face lights up with newfound hope as he aggressively agrees. Later that evening, our protagonist is lying in bed, feeling like a massive hypocrite. He repeats the kid's words about having talent for the sword, then stares at his own hands, wondering what kind of talent he might have had for magic. He softly mocks his own advice about swinging a sword instead of worrying. His private pity party is abruptly interrupted by a colossal explosion. A squad of cloaked mages has decided to casually set his house on fire. One of the mages asks if they successfully roasted him, but the leader barks at them to stay sharp because they are dealing with the Sword Saint. Proving the leader right, the main character casually jumps out the window of his burning house. He immediately clocks the highly skilled mages and their boss. The squad launches a barrage of spells, but Oscar slices right through their magic like it is nothing and closes the distance, nearly taking out the leader in one swing. He is forced to slam the brakes when he realizes one of the mages has grabbed his student as a hostage. The mage politely suggests the Sword Saint lower his weapon, unless he wants the trembling kid to meet an early end. Oscar asks what these pyromaniacs actually want. The leader states the obvious, demanding his life. Our protagonist points out he has not exactly lived a life that earns this kind of aggressive hatred. The leader basically says too bad, explaining they cannot allow him to exist because he apparently possesses overwhelming talent for both the sword and magic. Oscar is visibly confused by this bomb drop, but the leader coldly tells him he is going to die today anyway, so the details do not matter. Suddenly, the kidnapped student manages to uncover his mouth. He bravely shouts for his master to ignore him, declaring that as a swordsman, he is fully prepared to die. Hearing this, our protagonist shifts into serious mode. He agrees with the leader that their plan definitely backfired, flashing a deadly smile as he warns them not to underestimate his student. In the blink of an eye, Oscar completely obliterates the hostage-taker and manages to scratch the leader's face. But during the daring rescue, the main character takes a massive hit, getting frozen in place by the mage's ice magic to protect the kid. The mage leader shakes his head, muttering about how swordsmen are completely incomprehensible creatures, before declaring their mission accomplished and bidding them farewell. Collapsing from the fatal wound, Oscar thinks about the bitter irony of dying, just as he learns he is blessed with magical talent. The devastated kid asks why his master took the hit for him. Throwing a comforting smile, our guy reminds the kid that he is a swordsman too, and was always prepared to die. The kid breaks down sobbing, blaming himself, but Oscar gently cuts him off and insists it is not his fault. As his vision fades, the main character watches the crying kid and the retreating magers, mentally kicking himself. He realizes that if he were a mage, he could have easily saved the day. In his final moments, he admits he always wanted to use magic, and he only spent his life swinging a sword to run away from that truth. All his shiny medals and honors cannot even compete with how much his heart truly wanted to cast spells. But just like that, Oscar suddenly wakes up. He stares at his hands in pure confusion, stating the very obvious fact that he should definitely be dead. As the realization kicks in, the main character looks around and recognizes his old stomping grounds, the Asian village. He mutters that his subscription to life should have been permanently cancelled back there. Looking down at his remarkably undead hands, he spots two very important envelopes. One rocks a blue seal, and the other has a red one. The narration drops some handy exposition, explaining that when kids hit 15, they receive official invitations to both the Magic Academy and the Sword Academy. They have to pick a lane, grab the corresponding envelope, and go knock on their chosen academy's front door. Oscar strolls up to a nearby lake, peering into the water to check his reflection. Staring at his much younger face in the letters, it completely dawns on him that he has literally time-traveled back to his 14-year-old self, resetting the clock before he ever officially became a swordsman. His quiet lakeside epiphany is interrupted by three approaching figures. Initially looking like a trio of overgrown bullies, the protagonist quickly realizes they are adults, and one of them is his father, radiating an intensely intimidating purple aura. Staring at the man, Oscar is hit with the wild realization that since he is in the past, his dad is very much alive. His father immediately goes into strict parent mode, scolding the main character for getting arrogant with his skills and slacking off on his daily sweat sessions. Oscar keeps his mouth shut but privately disagrees. He knows he was not being arrogant back then, he was just having a massive internal crisis about confessing his secret love for magic. His dad was a legendary sword master with a whole fan club of disciples, so the protagonist was naturally shoved into the family business of swinging heavy metal. He remembers a specific moment from his childhood when his dad actually praised his improvements. Young Oscar tried to use that good mood to gush about how sparkly and beautiful magic was, but his dad instantly crushed that dream. Grabbing his arms, his father strictly declared that magic was a craft for the weak, and as his son, the sword was the only acceptable path. The narration explains that from that day on, the main character basically married his sword just so his dad would not emotionally abandon him, completely burying his magical dreams. But present-day Oscar is totally over it. Having already died once, he decides he has had enough of living a lie and plans to follow his actual passion. His father barks at him again, demanding to know what he has been doing instead of training. Oscar calmly claps back, stating he has already faced the sword enough for an entire lifetime. Apparently, that is the wrong answer. His father flexes his power, summoning a literal circle of glowing magic swords that point directly at the protagonist. The sheer force of the crushing aura radiating from his dad physically pushes the other two guys backward like a tidal wave. One of the lackeys stares in absolute shock, wondering how Oscar is managing to stay perfectly calm while staring down a floating armory. His dad eventually breaks the silence, noting that his son's unshakable calm proves he was not just fooling around. Dropping the heavy intimidation tactics, his father rests a heavy hand on the main character's shoulder, promising that if he keeps working this hard, he will eventually hand over the entire guild to him. Leaving that heavy expectation behind, his dad walks off with a proud smile. Oscar watches his father leave, barely getting a second to process before one of the remaining guys aggressively slaps him on the back. The guy flashes a toxic grin, bragging about how he eagerly waited for academy breaks just to see Oscar, enthusiastically offering to teach him the sword again. The protagonist mentally groans, remembering exactly who these guys are. Back in the day, his dad used to force him into sparring matches with them. Once these guys went off to the Sword Academy and unlocked their glowing sword auras, they basically used Oscar as a punching bag to work out all their bottled-up frustrations. The bully drops into a fighting stance, impatiently telling the main character to hurry up and get ready. Oscar privately notes that once someone unlocks an aura, it creates a massive power gap that pure physical technique just cannot close. But instead of drawing his weapon, Oscar turns his back and casually strolls over to the water. The bully is completely baffled, demanding to know what he is planning to do. Oscar politely thanks his sword for all its hard work over the years, and then absolutely eats the weapon straight into the bottom of the lake. The bullies burst into laughter, mocking him for throwing his weapon away, and calling him a total coward for trying to run. The main bully aggressively lunges at Oscar, screaming that turning his back and abandoning a fight is an absolute disgrace for a swordsman. But the protagonist completely ruins his dramatic attack by interrupting him with a fiercely confident smile. He boldly declares that he will not be swinging a sword ever again, because he is officially going to become a mage. The bully completely ignores the lack of a weapon, declaring that being unarmed will not save our protagonist from a massive beatdown. Oscar easily reads the guy's movements, immediately recognizing his sloppy attempt at physical enhancement using sword aura. He casually steps out of the way, dodging the attack with zero effort. Slipping right into professor mode, he lectures the absolute amateur that a sword needs to be treated as an extension of the body, not just a heavy piece of metal to swing around. The bully's ego takes a massive hit. He screams at the main character to stop looking down on him and launches another furious assault. Oscar effortlessly dodges again and again, mentally facepalming as he realizes he accidentally slips back into his old habit of lecturing his students. The frustrated attacker screeches about none of his hits landing and blindly charges in for another strike. Instead of drawing a weapon, our guy simply treats him to a high-definition slap straight to the face with his bare palm. The bully hits the dirt, cursing loudly. Before he can even process the humiliation, Oscar closes the distance in a flash. Hovering over him with a clenched fist prepared to punch, he asks the very obvious question of why an armed fighter would willingly throw away their range advantage against an unarmed opponent. Completely knocked out by the sheer embarrassment and physical trauma, the bully is eventually dragged away by his lackeys. Watching them retreat, the main character figures that should finally put an end to their random parking lot brawls. He reflects on his previous life, remembering how his father forcibly awakened his sword aura to make him stronger. To avoid repeating that miserable history and getting locked into the sword path again, he decides he needs to awaken his magical mana first. Cut to a dense forest, where Oscar is hiking through the trees, sweating profusely but determined to find a secluded spot where absolutely no one can spy on his secret training. Finding a quiet place, a memory from his past life bubbles up. He remembers eagerly interrogating a female mage about how magic actually works. He had explained that swordsmen build up spirit internally to buff their bodies and weapons, leaving him totally clueless about the mage process. The girl had calmly picked up a watering can and sprinkled some nearby flowers. She explained that using magic is exactly like watering plants. She told him that while mana is completely invisible, it naturally exists and fills the air all around them. Mages simply let that ambient mana flow through their internal bodily circuits, plug it into a magic formula, and boom, magic is activated. Back in the present, Oscar is perched on top of a large rock in the middle of the woods, piecing the theory together. If mana is everywhere, he just needs to perceive it to suck it into his circuits. He reasons that a swordsman uses all 5 senses, plus sheer survival instincts, to dodge death on a daily basis. He might have thrown away his blade, but the razor-sharp senses he honed as a legendary sword saint did not magically vanish. Therefore, he should absolutely be able to sense mana, even if he cannot physically see it. He closes his eyes to focus, and when he opens them again, he spots a faint purple aura glowing around his surroundings. He practically vibrates with joy, celebrating his monumental discovery of actual mana. However, his hype train derails almost instantly when he realizes the next step is drawing it into his body, and he has absolutely zero clue how to actually do that. Hopping down from his rock, he notices the glowing mana forming a subtle trail, almost like a glowing pathway. He follows it toward a suspicious patch of ground, his finely tuned radar screaming that something is incredibly off because the area is completely devoid of any life signs. Suddenly, the earth violently erupts. What initially looks like a hidden underground passage turns out to be a massive, terrifying golem bursting from the dirt. The main character stares up at the giant stone monster, utterly baffled as to why a creature like this is chilling in his local woods. Before he can get any actual answers, a girl with fiery red hair casually arrives on the scene, standing triumphantly on top of the golem like she owns the place. She glares down at him, demanding to know what business he has trespassing in her private workshop. accusing him of trying to steal her precious research results. She issues a frosty warning. She coldly suggests that if he values his continued subscription to life, he better choose his next words very carefully. The narration takes a quick detour to hype up this fiery redhead. Oscar recognizes her from legendary battlefield tales. She is Isabelle, the Mage of Creation of Life. She spent her days in the freezing north, controlling heavy-duty golems that packed the punching power of 1,000 soldiers, and successfully held the line against massive monster hordes like a true hero. Snapping back to the present, our protagonist is currently tied up like a human pretzel, sweating profusely as he realizes this is definitely not how he imagined meeting his idol. Isabelle demands to know which rival faction sent him. To emphasize she is dead serious about turning him into a past tense, a glowing magic circle casually materializes right beneath his feet. Oscar frantically begs her to hit the brakes. He points out that he completely surrendered without a fight and promises he is not an enemy. Unimpressed, Isabelle notes he sounds like someone in a massive hurry to die. She aims a fiery magic circle right at his face, bidding farewell to the nameless mage. Playing his only card, Oscar hastily clarifies that for the record, he is not even a mage yet. Isabelle calls that a pretty pathetic excuse and grabs his head to check for herself. Suddenly, her face pulls a dial-up modem expression of pure confusion. She completely short-circuits upon realizing there is absolutely zero mana flowing through his internal circuits. Confirming he is actually telling the truth, she officially unhostages him. She admits she understands his situation now but refuses to offer a single apology. She loudly complains that she just landed a shiny new professor gig at the Magic Academy, and people are already treating her like a public enemy. Oscar's ears immediately perk up at the words Magic Academy. Isabelle reveals she assumed he was a corporate spy trying to steal her precious golem research. Our guy realizes this is his golden ticket. If he can become her student before she starts teaching at the academy, he might actually figure out how to use his circuits. Throwing his pride out the window, he begs her to teach him how to draw mana into his body. Isabelle brutally rejects him on the spot. She firmly states she has absolutely zero interest in babysitting weak, incompetent men, telling him to drink his tea and go home. Oscar internally panics, knowing he cannot just walk away from his dream like this. Right on cue, a clunky serving golem shuffles over to pour them some tea. Staring at the mechanical butler, Oscar's newly unlocked vision kicks in, and he clearly spots the mana flowing inside it. He jumps up and warns Isabelle that her golem is acting strangely. She rolls her eyes, assuming he is just saying weird things to desperately get her attention. But the universe instantly proves him right when the golem aggressively pours the tea directly onto Isabelle instead of into her cup. While Isabelle is dripping with Earl Grey, she suddenly zeroes in on the golem's right shoulder, realizing the magical flow is completely clogged. She violently grabs the main character by the wrist, screaming to know how he spotted the malfunction. Oscar casually explains that the flow of mana just looked incredibly unnatural. Scrubbing her face with a handkerchief, Isabelle connects the dots and stares at him in absolute shock, demanding to know if he can literally see the invisible mana in the air. Oscar remembers his past life conversation about mana being totally invisible and drops the confident yes. Isabelle's brain goes into overdrive. She realizes that is exactly why her defensive barrier got shattered earlier, since her spell relies on interfering with invisible ambient mana. She wonders if this insane talent is a byproduct of his past life as a seasoned swordsman. Flashing a sudden, sharp grin, she completely flips her script and agrees to teach him. Oscar is suffering from emotional whiplash, reminding her she literally just said she hated weak, incompetent men. Isabelle shrugs it off, admitting he just successfully hijacked her interest. She offers her hand, and our boy excitedly shakes it, grinning like he just won the lottery. Cut to the world's most aggressive tutoring session. Two golems are holding up a heavy blackboard while Isabelle goes full professor mode. She corrects his biggest misconception immediately, explaining that as long as he is breathing, mana is already inside his body. When he asks how to make it move, she hits him with the teacup analogy. You cannot pour tea if you do not have a cup, meaning mana only flows into your circuits when given a specific magic formula to fill. She hands him a piece of magic paper with a spell inscribed on it, noting it is the standard issue assignment they hand out to academy freshmen. Oscar asks what kind of spell it is, but Isabelle smirks and tells him he has to successfully cast it to find out. She instructs him to focus on his internal power and imagine pouring it directly into the paper's formula. Oscar practically beams with joy and promises he can do it. As he gets ready, Isabelle privately thinks she made it sound way too easy. She knows even the quickest students take at least a solid month to pull this off, though maybe he can manage it in half a month if his talent is actually real. Oscar stares at the paper, focusing his mind inward. He treats it exactly like the first time he awakened his sword aura. Instantly, the signature purple sparkles of his mana flare to life. The energy flows seamlessly from his body straight into the paper, causing the drawn circle to glow a brilliant purple. Staring at the active spell, he realizes Isabelle was right on the money. The mana was inside him all along. A massive fireworks display suddenly lights up the sky. The narration drops some heavy wisdom, comparing learning manner to learning how to walk with brand new legs. Nobody comes out of the womb sprinting. You have to fall on your face a few times and learn how to move your body before you can finally stand upright. Back in the present, Isabel is staring at our boy like he just grew a second head. He actually pulled the spell off on his very first try, proving the old rumor that the higher someone rises in the magic world, the faster they learn to control mana. The spell he just activated was essentially a giant firework circle. While he stares at his glowing creation, Isabel is having a quiet mental breakdown in the background. She remembers him diagnosing her broken golem earlier, just by looking at the unnatural flow of energy, but even seeing invisible mana does not explain this level of sheer, unadulterated talent. She realizes he is absolutely the real deal. But instead of celebrating his historic victory, our boy frowns at the sparks. Isabel eagerly interrupts his silence, hyping him up and loudly declaring that activating a magic formula on the first try is completely unheard of. He immediately hits her with a brutal reality check, heavily criticizing his own work. He complains that the spell is simply not beautiful enough. To him, magic is supposed to be this gorgeous, special thing, and his fireworks look like a cheap knockoff. He points out that the mana flow right inside the magic formula felt clunky and off, exactly like her malfunctioning golem. Isabel is completely floored by his sky-high standards, but she casually suggests that if the formula bothers him that much, he can just rewrite the whole thing. The protagonist's eyes instantly light up like a kid in a candy store, eagerly leaning in and demanding to know how on earth someone actually writes a magic formula. The scene abruptly shifts back to the protagonist's father, who is currently walking with his bruised and battered disciples, including the bully our boy recently sent into the middle of next week with a single slap. The remaining lackeys are whispering in sheer panic, completely flabbergasted that Oscar got so strong and absolutely terrified of what to do next. The father stomps over, his intimidating presence cranked to the max, and demands to know what happened. The kids try to play it off as a minor accident, but the father immediately drops into full nightmare mode, his terrifying aura forcing them to instantly spill the truth. Hearing their pathetic confession, the father admits it is hard to believe his son casually beat down an awakened aura user. He coldly orders them to patch the loser up so they can resume their brutal training tomorrow. Left entirely alone, the father stares up at the sky with a dangerous smile, deciding that the time has officially come to force his son to awaken his sword aura. Snapping back to the magic lesson, Oscar admits he had no idea magic formulas were this deep. Isabel puffs up her chest, proudly stating that magic requires actual brainpower and knowledge, though she admits his instincts are not terrible. Feeling generous, she offers to lend him her personal stash of research books, bragging that all her genius knowledge is packed in there and telling him to take as many as he likes. Before she can even finish her sentence, she turns around and realizes our boy is already packing up a literal mountain of her precious books. He cheerfully announces he will be borrowing every single one of them. Isabel starts sweating profusely, demanding to know if he seriously plans to take the entire library. Oscar looks at her with pure innocence, reminding her she literally just gave him an all-you-can-read pass. Letting out an exhausted sigh, Isabel suddenly remembers a crucial detail. She hates to rain on his parade, but she drops a massive life-or-death warning. He strictly reminds him that he is officially a mage now, meaning mana has permanently moved into his internal circuits. She warns him with absolute seriousness that he must avoid sword aura at all costs, because mixing the two will immediately end his subscription to life. We have then a heavy flashback to the Asian village, showing our protagonist standing quietly by a horse. His older father calls him over, giving him a quick physical assessment before proudly declaring that the boy possesses immense natural talent. The father casually drops the crushing truth that he absolutely made the right choice by forcing his son to give up magic back in the day. Snapping back to the present, Oscar is tightly gripping the blue-sealed Magic Academy invitation. Staring ahead, he mentally pleads with his father to finally let him choose his own path this time around. The scene cuts straight to the dusty training ground, where his dad is currently standing around holding a heavy sword. Catching sight of his son, the father asks if he needs something. Oscar casually presents the invitation, explaining he needs a quick parental signature to officially enroll. His dad notes that this is incredibly sudden, but takes a closer look at the letter. Catching the hopeful smile on his son's face, the father dramatically rubs his face in sheer frustration. He demands to know why on earth Oscar is picking magic after spending his entire life studying the blade as his sole heir. Our boy smoothly brings up that specific childhood memory of begging to be a mage. His dad aggressively dismisses it as pure childish nonsense, practically poking a hole in Oscar's chest with his finger to emphasize the point. The main character agrees that it might sound like nonsense, and then immediately flexes his newly acquired, glowing mana right in his dad's face. His father completely loses his mind, screaming at the top of his lungs and demanding to know what kind of sick joke this is. Seeing his dad completely baffled that he managed to learn mana, Oscar calmly explains that permanently altering his internal circuits was the only logical way to actually convince him. His dad completely misses the point, ranting about how Oscar casually sent his senior disciples to the dirt earlier today without even needing to activate a sword aura. He screams that Oscar is throwing away a generational talent and a guaranteed path to massive success. Our boy holds his ground, firmly stating that he understands his talent perfectly well, but success does not always equal happiness. His dad aggressively rubs his face again, muttering that he finally understands the situation and deciding there is still time to fix this catastrophic mistake. He suddenly cranks his terrifying purple aura to the absolute max, radiating a glare that practically screams game over. He darkly asks if his son has forgotten the fatal rule that mixing two powers in one body equals an instant game over. He threatens that if Oscar insists on walking the wrong path, he will physically beat the stubbornness out of him. Drawing his massive sword, his dad promises that one day, his son will get on his knees and thank him for this brutal intervention. Oscar privately remembers his father passing away in his previous life, solemnly thinking that this supposed day of gratitude will literally never arrive. His dad points his weapon, ordering the main character to go fetch his sword and generously offering to wait. But our boy confidently announces he is officially a mage now. To drive his point completely home, he whips out the Elite Sword Academy invitation and casually tosses it straight into a nearby open fire. While his dad's jaw practically hits the floor in absolute shock, Oscar flashes a dangerously confident smile. He blatantly dares his old man to try and beat the magic out of him, completely ready to throw down using the secret, heavily stacked combat experience of a past-life sword saint. The father refuses to back down, warning our protagonist not to let his ego inflate just because he survived a little aura pressure. He launches a furious sword attack, but Oscar casually sidesteps it like he is dodging a slow-moving tourist. Oscar privately notes that he can read these aura-clad strikes like a large-print children's book. After all, during his previous life as a sword saint, he literally modeled his entire fighting style after his old man. The father swings again, missing completely, and grudgingly admits his son is living up to the hype. Dodging aura-enhanced strikes with zero bodily enhancements is a flex nobody else in their entire guild could pull off. Realizing pure technique will not work, the father decides to gamble on a 1 in 10,000 chance. He reaches out with a hand glowing with deadly purple aura, planning to forcibly inject it into his son to awaken his swordsman circuits. Oscar barely blinks, sarcastically asking if this is what his dad meant by beating the stubbornness out of him, or if he is just resorting to permanently breaking his kid because he is losing the fight. The father growls in pure frustration, calling him a foolish boy and insisting that raw talent is the only thing that matters. But Oscar fires right back, declaring there is something he absolutely refuses to give up on. When his dad assumes he means the sword, the main character completely shatters expectations by pulling out a clunky, beginner-level magic staff. Oscar remembers Isabel's lecture about magic requiring extensive knowledge. He might be a complete novice, but he realizes his dad has absolutely zero idea how to counter spells. The father charges, attempting a high-speed flanking maneuver. But Oscar sees right through the footwork, flashes a knowing smile, and steps out of the way. Pointing the wooden staff directly at his dad, he traces a small magic circle. Channeling the very first beautiful spell he ever dreamed of as a kid, he unleashes a blinding burst of magical sparkles right into his father's face. The dad covers his eyes in pain, dismissing the sparkly light show as a mere distraction and attempting a blind counterattack based purely on his warrior instincts. But Oscar completely intercepts the blind swing and effortlessly disarms him. Standing victorious, Oscar explains the trap. He knew his dad would try to swing using only his sense of presence, so the blinding spell was just a flashy decoy to easily snatch the weapon. Adding a dash of salt to the wound, he cheerfully reminds his dad that hiding a true objective behind fakeouts is a tactic he learned directly from him. Defeated and weaponless, the father finally throws in the towel. He sighs, arguing that while he can personally guarantee Oscar's swordsmanship, nobody is going to vouch for his magical talent. He claims he was only trying to force his son down a guaranteed path to success. Oscar instantly shuts that logic down, asking his dad if he only picked up a blade because someone handed him a written guarantee. That specific question hits the father like a ton of bricks, triggering a deeply buried memory of his late wife. Back when she was pregnant, he had confidently declared their unborn child would naturally have sword talent. His wife had immediately roasted him, teasing that he only started swinging a sword because he thought it looked cool. She firmly stated that there was no need to force a decision, because their child would be the one to choose their own path. Snapping back to the present, the father finally lets out a genuine, defeated smile. He admits he always pushed Oscar to become a sword saint someday, but leaves the thought hanging. Yielding to his son's choice, he reaches out to take the Magic Academy invitation. Oscar flashes a winning smile and playfully teases his disarmed dad that he will actually need a pen to sign it. The scene dramatically shifts to the prestigious halls of the Magic Academy, where a group of professors are busy gossiping about the incoming freshman class. A purple-haired girl with glasses excitedly lists off the VIPs, noting that Lady Norton, Lord Jerosas, and even Her Imperial Highness the Princess are officially enrolling. She gushes that these prodigies have already mastered not only basic spells, but also their secret family heirloom magic. A red-haired girl with a ponytail chimes in, while a male professor practically drools over the roster, delightedly declaring that these elite bloodlines are completely worthy of Saint-class status. Meanwhile, far away from the academic snobbery, we cut back to our boy chilling peacefully in his room, quietly writing something down. Fast forward 6 months. Our protagonist's father stares at him, realizing half a year just completely evaporated. Channeling his inner motivational speaker, the old man warns that just as Oscar dedicated his life to the blade, there are hardcore nerds out there who have spent their entire lives studying magic. He drops a surprisingly heartfelt plea, begging his son not to let himself get mentally broken by the competition. Our boy just flashes a massive grin. He confidently assures his dad that he will be perfectly fine, pointing out that literally nobody in the world is scarier than the man standing right in front of him. His dad accepts the compliment with a proud smile. Walking away, our guy stares at his acceptance letter, his soul practically doing backflips because he is finally heading to the Magic Academy. The scene shifts to the academy, and it is a complete magical circus. Students are literally flying around on brooms like it is rush hour traffic. Our protagonist takes it all in, noting that the National Magic Academy's vibe is completely different from the sweaty, muscle-bound energy of his old stomping grounds. He spots some tiny self-moving dolls scurrying around and instantly goes into full diagnostic mode, trying to figure out how they operate since they look like golems but clearly run on a different operating system. His mechanical musings are interrupted by a familiar voice warning him that lingering around will guarantee he is late for his enrollment paperwork. He spins around and beams with joy, spotting Isabel. She immediately interrogates him, asking if he spent the last 6 months slacking off. He confidently claps back that his magical toolkit is way bigger now than it was half a year ago. She smirks, eagerly challenging him to surprise her again. Changing the subject, Oscar points toward a crowd, asking where the placement exams are being held. Isabel gives him the academic rundown, explaining that freshmen are normally sorted into 2 basic tiers based on whether they possess mana or not. But way above those regular tiers sits the elite first class, an exclusive VIP section for the absolute best of the best, and the placement exam is the brutal sorting hat to weed out the weak. She explicitly warns him to avoid the elite exam like the plague, explaining that every single student aiming for that class is an absolute monster who has been marinating in magic since they were in diapers. Instead of being intimidated, our boy's eyes light up like neon signs. He eagerly concludes that the elite class must teach the highest level of magic, completely missing her warning. Realizing her advice just bounced right off his thick skull, Isabel totally gives up, telling him to go witness the horror show for himself if he is that curious. Cut to the exam battleground, where a student just successfully blasted a target with some water magic, celebrating like they just won the lottery. Oscar analyzes the setup, figuring out the exam is basically target practice with spells. Suddenly, his finely tuned radar pings. He feels someone glaring holes into the back of his head. A thoroughly obnoxious student named Gazan, hailing from the incredibly snooty House Generosus, marches right up and tells Argyle to scram, declaring this prestigious area is no place for a lowly commoner. Our boy calmly points out the rulebook clearly states any new student can take a swing at the exam. He mentally applauds Gazan's terrible people skills, finally connecting the dots on Isabel's earlier warning. Not only is the elite class full of lifelong magic nerds, but it is also a giant echo chamber of rich kids gatekeeping anyone without a fancy title. Gazan aggressively shoves Oscar aside, commanding him to shut his mouth and watch a real master take the stage. Gazan steps up for his turn, flashing a wildly arrogant smirk. He loudly preaches that the first class is exclusively for elites who have dedicated their entire existence to magic, telling the commoner to witness the massive gap that years of expensive tutoring creates. Gazan dramatically chants his spell, unleashing a massive attack called Great Freeze Mega Pagono. A gargantuan block of solid ice violently erupts, completely surrounding the entire training ground. The stands erupt into a massive fan club, with students screaming praises for House Generosus and loudly gossiping that the giant ice cube of doom was not even Gazan's full power. Gazan shoots a smug look back at our boy, claiming this proves exactly why amateurs who cannot cast proper magic are utterly unwelcome here. Our protagonist stares at the winter wonderland and completely ruins Gazan's ego trip by offering a painfully honest review. He calmly admits it is an undeniably amazing spell that clearly shows a lifetime of dedication, but then casually drops the bomb that it is an absolute waste of energy. Gazan practically short-circuits, furiously demanding to know what the commoner just dared to say. Oscar ignores the temper tantrum, having a quiet moment of reflection. As a former Sword Saint, He knows all too well the heavy price of grinding for years, and he actually walked in here slightly worried about whether his 6 months of magic practice would be enough to crack the first class. But thanks to Gazan's incredibly inefficient demonstration, all his anxiety just magically evaporated. Flashing a brilliantly confident smile, the main character sincerely thanks the fuming noble for the confidence boost and boldly prepares to take his own exam. Quick pause. If you're enjoying the story so far, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps to make it worth to bring next parts. Done? Awesome, let's get back to it. The crowd completely erupts into laughter, pointing mockingly at our protagonist's basic, beginner-level wooden staff. One vocal hater in the stands loudly declares there is absolutely zero chance anyone can in properly with a cheap twig like that. Meanwhile, Gazan is having a private meltdown on the sidelines. He tries to comfort his bruised ego, muttering that his ice magic from House Generosus is completely flawless, but he is visibly spiraling as he wonders what kind of verbal truck Oscar just hit him with. Back on the actual training ground, the female professor overseeing the exam mentally praises this year's fresh crop of students. She notes that Gazan is an absolute lock for the top rank given his massive, over-the-top spell scale, but her attention shifts entirely to Oscar. She wonders what on earth he is doing just standing there like a statue. The peanut gallery in the stands screams for him to just give up already if he cannot hit anything. The professor, however, notices his terrifyingly calm demeanor. She realizes he is not struggling at all. He is actively waiting for the perfect opening, completely devoid of any anxiety or impatience. Suddenly, our boy casually unleashes a basic fire bullet spell. In a fraction of a second, he perfectly snipes every single moving target right dead in the center with one single, continuous shot. The professor is absolutely floored, realizing his attack was so blindingly fast she could barely even track the movement. Naturally, the snobby crowd immediately starts booing. They complain that he only used a painfully basic spell that barely left tiny scorch marks, loudly declaring his attempt a total fail and a massive waste of time because he did not use anything flashy. Hearing the aggressive reviews, Oscar turns to the stunned professor and asks if that means he actually failed. Snapping out of her shock, she quickly assures him that instantly hitting all 5 targets guarantees a definitive pass. She practically begs to know why he fired like that instead of picking them off one by one, asking if it was just a lucky flip. Our protagonist takes a moment before politely explaining his logic. He admits Gazan's giant ice cube was undeniably impressive, but notes that dumping that much mana is a colossal waste of energy. Since this exam is supposed to simulate actual monster combat, he figured treating it like a real battlefield and aggressively conserving his mana was the smartest play. The professor's eyes go wide as she fully grasps his battle-hardened logic, immediately apologizing for ever doubting his methods. As Oscar casually walks away, the professor watches him go, utterly mesmerized. She realizes that while his spell was completely unflashy, his flawless timing and absolute mana control put him leagues above everyone else. Staring at his retreating back, she practically sees the heavy, imposing aura of a veteran sword saint radiating off him. Meanwhile, our boy is just happily strolling down the hall, completely geeking out over the fact that the professor's magic targets were moving on their own. He is absolutely thrilled to meet such an incredibly skilled mage on his very first day. His joyful internal fangirling is violently interrupted when his razor-sharp instincts detect someone lurking nearby. He spins around, demanding to know who is hiding in the area. A grandfatherly figure steps out, cheerfully praising the young mage for having such good eyes and sharp instincts. Introducing himself as Balsamius, the headmaster of the Imperial Magic Academy, the old man looks exactly like a budget Gandalf. Our boy immediately bows in respect, while Gandalf politely apologizes for actively spying on his exam. But as Oscar lifts his head, his soul practically leaves his body for a permanent vacation. His eyes lock onto a very specific necklace resting on the headmaster's chest. An absolute tidal wave of chills violently crashes down his spine as he instantly recognizes it. It is the exact same accessory worn by the mage leader who casually murdered him in his previous life. Completely oblivious to the fact that our protagonist is currently having a high-definition panic attack, Gandalf cheerfully asks if something is the matter, urging Oscar to step closer and say hello. Staring at the headmaster's chest, Oscar practically blue screens, realizing this Gandalf lookalike is rocking the exact same pendant as the mage who permanently cancelled his subscription to life in his previous run. Pushing his internal panic aside, he reaches out to shake the old man's hand. But instead of a friendly greeting, Gandalf flashes a suspicious grin and casually summons a literal tornado. Our protagonist violently eats himself backward to avoid becoming airborne. Gandalf cheerfully applauds the dodge, wondering out loud if the kid has sharp eyes or just razor-sharp instincts. Sweating profusely, Oscar asks if the old man is here to turn him into a past tense. Gandalf just chuckles, asking if the kid really thinks a tiny wooden staff is enough to save him. Without missing a beat, the headmaster casts a high-level wind barrier called Stone Prison, trapping the main character in a violently swirling cage of air. Realizing there is zero chance of physically escaping the windblender, Oscar instantly fires off a Firebird spell directly at the old man's face. Gandalf is genuinely shocked that the kid managed to pull off that specific spell, barely throwing up a magical block in time to stop his eyebrows from getting singed off. Gandalf instantly drops the wind cage, noting he is completely out of shots. He points out that if the kid had not immediately aimed for the caster to break the spell, Oscar would be the one taking a dirt nap right now. Getting back on his feet, our boy firmly tells the headmaster to drop the jokes, demanding to know what exactly this lethal pop quiz was trying to achieve. Gandalf drops the playful act and delivers some heavy truth. He explains that high society treats magic like an exclusive VIP club, and anyone who stands out too much immediately gets hammered down by the establishment. He wanted to give Oscar a first-hand taste of that elite bullying to properly gauge his true strength. The protagonist quickly connects the dots, realizing that flexing his skills means painting a massive target on his own back. Gandalf completely agrees, warning that there are pure-blood extremists out there who aggressively refuse to accept a talented commoner. Hearing this, Oscar gets a massive sense of déjà vu, remembering the cloaked assassins from his past life talking about his unforgivable talent. He demands to know exactly who these extremists are, but Gandalf shuts him down, warning that knowing their identities would only fast-track his funeral, advising him to focus entirely on leveling up his own stats to survive. The main character mentally agrees, realizing that if this budget Gandalf had actually wanted him dead, his head would have already been evicted from his neck. Shifting the interrogation, Oscar points directly at the terrifying pendant. Gandalf casually explains it is the official mark of a magic saint. Our boy's brain finally clicks, realizing magic saint is the absolute highest rank for magers, exactly like his old sword saint title. The headmaster then tosses a small badge to the kid, cryptically warning him not to lose it because it will definitely come in handy. And just like that, the old man teleports away on a breeze, completely vanishing without leaving a single ripple in the surrounding ambient manner. Staring at the empty space, Oscar realizes he cannot just casually study magic and coast through the second life. If the people who murdered him were literal magic saints, and there is a solid chance they will come after him again, he has absolutely no choice but to grind his stats until he completely surpasses the legendary sword saint he used to be. The scene sharply transitions to a massive, incredibly fancy classroom filled with students who look like they smell of expensive cologne and generational wealth. The gossip mill is already working overtime. Two students are loudly whispering about the new guy, absolutely mind-blown that a lowly commoner not only made it into the elite first class, but also completely obliterated the entrance exam. Gazan, the walking ice cube with the fragile ego, sneers at the rumors. He bitterly declares it is pathetic, insisting the commoner is just treating the academy like a game and will definitely wash out in record time. Right on cue, the heavy classroom doors swing open and the main character casually walks in. The entire room goes dead silent as all eyes snap toward him. Gazan practically chokes on his own spite, completely shocked to see our boy confidently strutting into the room, wearing the sleek academy uniform and looking like an absolute high-definition dream. Our boy takes Gandalf's survival advice straight to heart. Back in his dorm room, he is aggressively running magical wind sprints. He figures out that repeatedly pushing mana through his internal circuits is exactly like doing cardio to build lung capacity. Staring out his window, he notes his magical stamina is slowly but surely leveling up, though he realizes he desperately needs a chance to farm some actual combat experience. Throwing on his academy uniform, a massive epiphany hits him. For the first time across 2 entire lifetimes, he actually wants to grind for strength instead of being forced into it. Cut back to the bougie classroom. Gazan is currently glaring daggers at our protagonist, his fragile ego still trying to process how the commoner humiliated him earlier. Our guy easily catches the hostile staring contest, mentally noting that the Isipsa's noble is unfortunately in his class too, but he quickly brushes it off. His attention completely shifts when he spots a cute girl wearing glasses. He smoothly approaches her, handing over a dropped floral bookmark. The girl beams with pure joy, thanking him profusely. Our boy's memory instantly clicks, realizing this is the exact same mage who gave him the magical Wateringkin lecture in his past life. Noting the design on the bookmark, he playfully mentions she must really love flowers. When she asks if he is a fan too, he smoothly deflects the question, locking eyes and claiming he just thought this specific flower was incredibly beautiful. Dropping his name as Oscar, he boldly asks to secure the seat right next to her. She happily agrees, introducing herself as Lily Lowell. The wholesome introductions are abruptly cut short when a new voice echoes through the room. The students whip their heads around in confusion before a purple-haired, spectacled professor practically materializes at the front of the class. She introduces herself as Ruth, the head honcho in charge of this elite group. Oscar immediately recognizes her as the stunned proctor from the target practice exam. Ruth wastes absolutely zero time. She announces that since they already proved their raw talent by passing the brutal selection exam, they are jumping straight into field training next week to fight actual monsters. While the rich kids process the danger, our boy's eyes light up like neon signs, absolutely thrilled to get his hands on some real combat experience so early in the semester. To ensure nobody dies, Ruth explains they need to form perfectly balanced parties of 5. She plans to measure their circuit performance, which is basically their maximum mana fuel tank. When the snobby students demand to know how she plans to test that on the spot, she flashes a sly smile and reveals the test is already over. A massive magic circle illuminates the ceiling, projecting glowing orbs above every student's head to publicly broadcast their power levels. Ruth mentally scans the room, totally impressed by the heavy hitters packing serious mage tier capacities, before turning her gaze to check on our boy. In reality, our protagonist is completely ignoring his own power level. He's too busy staring at the ceiling, absolutely geeking out over the mechanics of the scanning spell. Meanwhile, the peanut gallery of elite students points at his undeniably pathetic power orb. They lovingly whisper that he really is just a useless commoner, confidently predicting that absolutely nobody will ever want to team up with him. Proving the haters instantly wrong, Lily taps his shoulder and sweetly offers him a spot in her party. Oscar is genuinely surprised and asks if she is absolutely sure about dragging him along. Operating on pure Disney princess logic, she confidently declares that anyone who appreciates flowers cannot possibly be a bad person. However, there is one tiny catch. They have to get the green light from a noble named Levinson first. They pitch the recruitment idea to Levinson, who immediately looks Oscar up and down like he is a bad piece of modern art. He questions the wisdom of adding the commoner to their ranks. Playing the diplomatic game perfectly, our boy politely begs to be let into the squad. Soaking up the spotlight, Levinson dramatically stands up and puffs out his chest. He loudly declares that protecting the weak is his sacred noble duty, generously agreeing to drag Oscar along, but strictly as their designated luggage carrier. Later, Oscar is strolling down the outdoor walkway with Lily. The background extras are still actively pointing and gossiping about the commoner infiltrating the elite ranks. Lily tries to run damage control, gently begging him not to let the toxic whispers get to him. She explains that nobles start their magical tutoring in diapers, so a massive power gap is completely natural. Our guy shrugs it off with zero damage to his ego, insisting he's just incredibly happy she tossed him a lifeline for the party. Trying to make casual conversation, Lily asks how long he has actually been practicing magic. Oscar casually drops the bomb that he started about half a year ago after finally finding a decent tutor. Hearing this, Lily completely blue screens. She stops dead in her tracks, looking a little bit like a Windows update that got stuck at 99%, utterly shell-shocked by his 6-month speedrun into the most exclusive class in the academy. The scene shifts to Professor Ruth, who is suddenly cornered by Gazan. The ice-wielding noble approaches her with the unearned confidence of someone who watches way too many alpha male podcasts, demanding to know why a lowly commoner is allowed to pollute their elite group. He angrily clenches his fist, insisting that Oscar has pathetic manner and will inevitably drag everyone down. Ruth simply flashes a knowing smile. She asks Gazan if he would still be talking all that trash if he knew the commoner only awakened to magic exactly 6 months ago. Gazan's brain completely short-circuits, looking a little bit like a dial-up modem struggling to connect. Leaving him in a state of pure disbelief, Ruth casually points out that in a few months, the commoner might be the one looking down on him. She confidently states that closing that gap is exactly why they have field training, walking away while Gazan's ego shatters into a million icy pieces. Back in the classroom, Lily is giving our protagonist a crash course on the magical food chain. She explains that since most nobles start training while they are still in diapers, they usually enter the academy boasting adept level mana. He draws a mental pyramid for him, starting from the bottom with apprentice, moving up to adept, archmage, emperor, and finally capping off at the legendary Saint Mage. Oscar nods, noting that reaching adept rank is seriously impressive since that is the level required to actively fight monsters. Lily aggressively shakes her head, practically vibrating with excitement. She insists that the truly unbelievable flex is Oscar reaching the apprentice rank in a mere 6 months. Oscar privately questions if he actually has ridiculous natural talent, or if his terrifying red-haired master was just a ridiculously good teacher. Lily firmly shuts that down, claiming his progress is completely abnormal regardless of who taught him. Changing the subject, our boy asks Lily why she is voluntarily hanging out with a snob like Levin. She explains that Levin belongs to a great noble house, and families like hers basically follow them around to secure political protection. She defends the arrogant noble, insisting that while Levin is definitely rough around the edges, his strength is the real deal and he will definitely protect them when things get dangerous. Oscar internally groans at this. He sees this field trip as a rare opportunity to farm some actual combat experience, so having a rich kid step in to protect him is going to be a massive inconvenience for his leveling grind. Fast forward to a dense, creepy forest. Professor Ruth gathers the students to explain the rules of their field training. Their objective is simple: survive one night in a forest crawling with lower-rank monsters. Oscar is absolutely thrilled to get another practical task so soon. Ruth then points out the special magic papers handed to each team leader. She explains they contain a heavy-duty defensive barrier and an emergency distress signal, advising them to pop the spell if things get too dangerous. The wealthy students immediately relax, whispering that having a panic button makes this camping trip a total breeze. But Ruth drops the ultimate fine print. She warns them that any party who actually uses the emergency paper will be instantly demoted and kicked out of the first class. The collective blood pressure of the nobles skyrockets, their faces draining of color as pure panic sets in. Even Lily looks completely terrified. Oscar notes how violently the atmosphere just shifted, realizing that holding on to their elite status is a matter of life and death for these rich kids. Sensing the panic, Levin puffs out his chest and confidently steps into the spotlight. He proudly declares that as a noble among nobles, there is zero chance he will let his party withdraw, promising to personally carry them to victory. To prove his dominance, he violently hurls a gargantuan overstuffed backpack right at our boy, ordering his designated luggage carrier to hurry up. Lily tries to play peacekeeper, politely pointing out that tossing a mountain of bags at someone is incredibly rude. But the main character just casually catches it, insisting he can handle the weight since that was their original agreement. Levin smirks, noting he likes people who actually know their place, and barks at Oscar not to slow him down. Cut to the actual hike. Levin is currently sweating like a sinner in church, panting heavily as he struggles to navigate the rough terrain. Oscar casually offers him a hand, politely noting that the uneven ground is pretty tough to walk on. His pride violently bruised. Levin grinds his teeth and aggressively slaps the hand away, telling the commoner to shut up. As Lily rushes over to check on him, Levin secretly glares at our protagonist, his mind spiraling as he wonders how the luggage-carrying peasant looks completely relaxed while he is practically fighting for his life. Meanwhile, Oscar is looking around the quiet woods, feeling a bit disappointed. He figures that since the Academy manages this area, it makes sense that they have not encountered a single monster yet. Suddenly, his advanced manavision kicks in. He spots a highly suspicious, glowing light radiating from the ground directly in front of them. He immediately shouts for the squad to freeze and not take another step. Levin immediately throws a temper tantrum, furiously demanding to know who the luggage boy thinks he is ordering around. As the angry noble stubbornly stomps his foot forward, Oscar's razor-sharp instincts finally recognize the magical signature. It is a space-affecting magic barrier, operating exactly like the traps in Isabel's workshop. But the warning comes a second too late. Levin's foot lands right on the trigger. The trap violently activates, sending the rich kids into a state of absolute high-definition panic as they wonder what on earth they just stepped into. Completely unbothered by the unfolding chaos, our boy calmly whips out his cheap beginner staff and smoothly orders his terrified party to get into combat formation. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you enjoyed this recap, drop a like and let me know your favorite moment in the comments. I'll see you in the next video for more madness. Peace.